This is Noise from the Cranium. My name is Doug, and in this episode, we finish examining the spectacular fall of the Jeff Beck Group and the mercurial rise of Jimmy Page and Led Zeppelin. We'll see how Page stood on Beck's shoulders to attain the heights of glory that Beck failed to grasp. In August of 1968, while Jeff Beck was basking in the glory of the American success of the Jeff Beck Group, Jimmy Page was preparing to rise from the ashes of the Yardbirds. To get a piece of the American music pie that Beck was mining, he formed the new Yardbirds with John Paul Jones from the Bolero Sessions on bass. He had a number of vocalists in mind for this new project, but when they weren't available, one of his choices, Terry Reid, recommended Robert Plant.
I've been dazed and confused, so long it's not true. I wanted a woman, never bargained for you. Sweet little baby, say what you will. Turn back so much when I send you the bill.
Page checked Plant out and realized that Plant was just what he was looking for. They still needed a drummer, and after considering a number of established drummers, Plant recommended his old bandmate and friend, John Bonham. Once they played together, they all knew they had something special. Further, Page knew that this band would be the perfect unit to exploit the American market. Modeled after the Jeff Beck Group, this band was all that and more. Page dialed up the volume and the aggression, but steered clear of the internal strife that plagued Beck's group. He would have none of that.
Thank you very much. I'd like to introduce Led Zeppelin to you. On bass guitar, John Paul Jones. John Paul Jones. On drums, John Bonham. Lead guitar, Jimmy Page. And myself, Robert Plant.
The band began a brief tour to fulfill a previous contract and to get used to playing together. Page combined some of the old Yardbirds songs, threw in a few blues songs that he and Plant knew, and built a set list that they improvised over. In September, while the material was still fresh, Page paid for studio time to record the material that they had just worked up. He produced the sessions himself, relying on his years of experience as a studio musician, arranger, composer, and producer. He knew exactly what he wanted, and his production elevated the music to a higher level. With innovative miking techniques, very heavy guitar sounds, and a killer stereo mix, it lifted the band's sound head and shoulders above the competition. In October, Page decided on a name for this new project. It was to be called Led Zeppelin, based on Keith Moon's offhand comment a couple of years earlier. Between Page and Grant, they set the tone for Led Zeppelin's future in every aspect of how the band was handled. Since Page had used his own money to finance the album, he and Grant could broker the best deal possible, from the contract they signed, starting their own publishing company, and having final say on most decisions. In the end, they fully controlled their product, image, and terms of existence. It was a watershed moment. Musically, the first Led Zeppelin album followed the same basic blueprint as Truth. Both albums were made up of predominantly heavy songs, and both contrasted that by breaking up the heaviness with a light acoustic song. Beck's Green Sleeves was countered by Zepp's Black Mountainside. Just as Beck had used the Yardbirds song Shapes of Things, Page pulled out Dazed and Confused, a song that the Yardbirds had played live when Jimmy was in the band. Interestingly, and much to Beck's disgust, both albums contain a version of Muddy Waters' You Shook Me. When Page played Beck and acetated the album before it was released, Beck was initially impressed. That is, until he heard Zepp's version of You Shook Me.
You know you shook me. You shook me all night long.
Aside from being momentarily flattered, he was incredulous, annoyed, and just plain stunned. He couldn't believe that his friend Page would one-up him by recording a song that Beck had just released a few months earlier.
You know that you shook me. You shook me all night long. And the way that you love me, babe.
Although the Zeppelin song was arranged differently and was twice as long, both songs featured organ parts played by John Paul Jones. On Beck's version, the organ is understated, backing the rest of the band, while Nicky Hopkins' piano part is more out front, playing a series of classic blues riffs. Zeppelin's version has no piano, but John Paul Jones's organ part plays classic blues riffs similar to the piano riffing on Beck's version. When accused of stealing from Beck, Page later claimed that he had no knowledge of Beck's version when he released Led Zeppelin 1. However, Jimmy Page was an astutely clever musician and steeped in music business savvy. Take a moment to consider the following. Beck and Page were close friends. They shared a manager in Peter Grant. Peter Grant actually took Page to a number of Jeff Beck concerts mere months prior to forming Led Zeppelin. The song was in Beck's setlist at the time. Considering all of this, and the fact that John Paul Jones played on both versions of the song, it seems rather far-fetched that Page didn't know about Beck's version. Be that as it may, the album, and You Shook Me specifically, shook Jeff Beck. He felt more than a little betrayed. Led Zeppelin 1 was released on January 12, 1969, roughly 6 months after Truth. Building on the sound he had pioneered with the Yardbirds, coupled with the heavy blues sound of Cream and Hendrix, the energy of The Who, and the groundbreaking innovation of Beck's Truth, Led Zeppelin 1 added elements of American and British folk and Indian music, pushing things a bit further to create something a little different.
You got a lot, and that's what I want. Communication breakdown, it's always the same. Having a nervous breakdown drive me insane. Hey, yeah!
At the time, the first Zeppelin album was panned by critics as an inferior copy of Truth, indicating that there was nothing that Beck hadn't done as well or better 3 months ago. However, the album went on to outperform Truth in every aspect, and the new sounds created by Page and Led Zeppelin became the benchmark for what was to come. Beck, still reeling after hearing the Zeppelin album, became unnerved and seriously doubted the merits of his own band. True to form, he went back to his erratic ways. He fired his own drummer and bass player, only to hire Ron Wood back again later. He fell ill on the tour, and the constant infighting within the band seemed to escalate and was causing serious unrest. He cancelled a tour, headed back to Britain to record another album, but it wasn't enough to overcome what Page's Zeppelin had done to him. Friction within the band and Beck's temperamental ways caused him to cut short their last US tour. He called it quits and broke up the band in August 1969, one day before they were scheduled to play Woodstock. Zeppelin stood the test of time and became one of the founding fathers of the hard rock and heavy metal genre. Their early hard work and attention to business detail ensured them continued and growing worldwide success. Beck, on the other hand, soon moved away from the style he pioneered and on to funkier and jazz rock styles. In the end, it was Page's even-tempered demeanor and cold, calculating business acumen, coupled with manager Peter Grant's savvy in mounting a full-on attack on the US market, that vaulted Led Zeppelin to the pinnacle of rock superstardom. If you look up the history of hard rock and heavy metal today, you will find that the first heavy metal acts are considered to be Led Zeppelin, Deep Purple, and Black Sabbath. You have to dig a little further to find any mention of Jeff Beck in that list. To me, it was the innovative and groundbreaking work that Jeff Beck did with both Beck's Bolero and the Truth album that provided Jimmy Page with the spark of the idea and impetus to follow through with Led Zeppelin. This has been Noise from the Cranium. Thanks for listening, and I'll catch you next time.
You